Hi, great to see everyone, and great for Kevin organising conference here about e-commerce in Northern Ireland. I'm Dan Loughlin from Ecommerce. We're based here in Northern Ireland, and the title of the talk is Rebuilding E-commerce Around Merchant Profit, and we call that a merchant-first philosophy. So I'm just going to talk through how we believe that you can do this in a very clear way, and about our product. There's two sides to e-commerce, and this is really common across the board, but our product systemizes this a lot more than other companies. You have a product which you're using, effectively a platform to sell online, and then informally you are picking service providers to do services for you, and we have some logos up there: Google pay-per-click, Facebook pay-per-click, email marketing. You could add others in there, affiliate marketing, and TikTok even, but I haven't seen much data on what their ROIs are for direct e-commerce yet. But so informally, everybody's doing this. We have a platform that's highly geared towards sales and profits, but we have a service marketplace that we are monitoring very closely, because within that realm, you're generating a lot of your traffic, and that's going to determine your profitability. So there's two sides to it, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Some of the merchants we've dealt with are on the screen there. Some of them became very large in their markets, and probably one side of the ERP platform was the transaction volume has been a couple of billion, but the breadth of countries, you don't need multiple storefronts or anything like that. You can connect in immediately, and then with the marketing cloud, connect in all your Google shopping feeds, all first-party analytics, first-party email systems. So I think first-party is really where it has to go because of privacy, folks. And anybody who knows anything technically about Google Analytics and GDPR, you begin to realize that it can't do what it's got to do going forward. I mean, even from a legal standpoint, never mind a technical standpoint of being blocked out in browsers. So addressable market sizes. I thought I would start with this in the conversation before I get into talking about profit and the methodologies. The addressable markets are very, very large, and I think that almost leads to irrationality from people, because they start to think these are sizes, they're moving targets, but they're roughly in these areas from what you can get in the research online. Online beauty, massive market. Online drink, massive market. Even equestrian, 170 million. Online bike market, we have involved in that, 800 million to 1 billion. And international markets, that's UK market sizes. International market sizes are many times larger than that. And the American market is about 5-6 times bigger. Chinese market's much bigger again, and then all the markets in between. So the markets are absolutely massive for products, and that's significant. And it means the fact there are big opportunities for what you're selling. But the other side of this is, and this is the downside, the markets owe you absolutely nothing, and they're accessible to all your competition. So you got to compete for every sale. You're owed nothing by it. Even though you're entering a big market with huge opportunities, it doesn't mean you're going to get anywhere. So you have to take market share, and this is the same for absolutely any business that you're going to be involved in. You're going to have to grow sales. You're going to have to control costs. Doesn't matter if you're e-commerce or you're selling something you've manufactured or whatever business you're in. You're going to have to grow sales. You're going to have to control your costs to maximize your profit, because if there's no profit in a business, ultimately it runs out of road. You can raise investment and things like that, but that is just on the back of future profits. So if there's no profit, you're going to get nowhere. And to grow, ultimately, you're going to have to outperform your market. So that's how you're going to take market share, and that's how you're going to grow a business. Before we get into strategy, because I guess the merchant first ideas are effectively strategies, a basic template for what you got to do. E-commerce is entirely MAS based, and it's for me to be in a situation where people are still using acronyms as though there's an answer through an acronym like SEO or social media. It is really looking at the wrong thing. You got to talk about profit. You got to talk about cost and sales, and so there's no mystery to how you're going to get the profit here on these equations, and you can download it after, because it's going to be hard to take it all in 30 minutes, even though it's been simplified. But there's no mystery here. It's MAS based, and so the next series of this talk we'll talk about merchant first, what that means, and how you rebuild around profit. So the merchant is effectively the person that's paying everybody's bills. So they're paying the bills for the platforms, they're paying the bills for the service providers who are providing services for them, they're paying the bills for Facebook and Google PPC and other marketing channels. So the merchant's the one paying the bills, but they often really don't know where their sales are coming from or who they should be dealing with. So you've got to rebuild e-commerce around the person that's paying the bills, because they're also more than that. They're the risk bearer, they're taking the risks. Everyone else is setting out their fees to make sure they make profit, and then you have someone who is taking all the risks. So we say you got to build it around the merchants, and in that, the merchant owners and the teams around them should also benefit. That's who you build your e-commerce around. And to do that, there's 3 key areas in this talk. And it won't get into huge detail on all the tactics that are involved, but I want to talk about how you know how you're going to make profit. So, part 1, the maths behind e-commerce sales. How do you get to your sales number? Completely mathematically, so there's no debate on where it's coming from. Second part, maths behind e-commerce profit. Sales are nothing without profit. So you need to know how you get from your sales number to your net profit number, by the way, not gross profit or any other form of profit, your net profitability. And part 3 is really related to what we're saying before about the idea of a platform and service marketplace, the absolute formalization of this around services. So you're going to get performance and cost control via a service marketplace. And you're all involved in service marketplaces, whether you realize that or not, but IRPs is a very formalized, data-led one. And this is simply the maths behind sales. And people might be rolling their eyes, a little bit at it. Why are we starting here? Because you need to know exactly how you get your sales number. And visitors effectively just use sessions. Your sessions multiplied by your conversion rate, multiply that by your average order value is your sales number. So everyone who's running a website, that's where your number comes from. We can see on the right-hand side, just to make the maths easy, 1 million visitors at a 2% conversion, at a 50% average order value, you get 1 million in sales. So that's how you generate your sales on your website. And it also follows from that then, on a second slide with the same formula, you can only increase your sales by increasing your visitors, increasing your conversion rate, or increasing your average order value. That's the only way you're going to increase your top line sales. And tactically, you're much better increasing your conversion rate and your average order values first, because you're going to pull down your cost of revenue or your CPA. So that's how you get your sales number. Everybody should be totally aware of those 3 multiplications on their site, because there's only 3 levers you're ever going to pull to get more money, more sales. This is the next part, the maths behind profit. Sales are no good at all unless you're going to make profit. And it's very important to step in here to be able to understand the danger within profits and the danger within e-commerce. First part, sales minus your cost of goods, your gross margin, gross profit number. Everyone can know that easily. Step 2, I think this is one of IRP's contribution to the e-commerce accounting really, is that gross profit minus your traffic spend is your e-commerce gross profit. And why do you take that step out to separate it? Because your traffic spend is a highly variable cost of revenue that's bouncing up and down and determining your profitability. Because your product margin won't change that much. Your overheads won't change that much. This one is determining your profitability. So that step's very important. And then you take off, after you get your e-commerce gross profit, take off your overheads, you're at your net profit. And you can go straight then from visitors to net profit. And this takes out all the mystery behind anything. Visitors, conversion rate, AOV, e-commerce sales minus cost of goods, gross profit. Everyone knows that. The third step that's very important, gross profit minus traffic spend, e-commerce gross profit. That's the key step. E-commerce gross profit minus overheads gives you your net profit. And just to show that that's mathematical, it'll be hard to read this. Well, it's not so hard. It's hard to read this direction in the glasses. So this is a real-world example. I'm using real-world examples here from companies we're dealing with, and have obfuscated who they are. So they've made 2.3 million sales. The cost of goods, 1.6 million. It's 32% product margin. gross profit 768K. The danger zone, variable traffic spend, should have put that one in red. 7.5% cost. And by the way, I'll say this while I'm at it, and people will disagree, or they can have a comment after. I don't believe in the word ROAS at all, because it's not an accounting term. And if you have, for example, a 10% ROAS, you've got to invert it anyway and say it's a 10%, or 10. If you ROAS of 10, you have to invert it and say it's a 10% cost. If you've a ROAS of 20, you have to invert it and say it's 5% cost, maybe. And so more often like a ROAS of 5, and it's a 20% cost. So you're much better dealing with a CPA percentage, which is effectively a cost of revenue, and that's an accounting term. But you get your gross profit, take off your overheads, fairly static, you're at net profit. That's what it's all about. And you've a net profit margin. So that's how you go from visitors right down to net profit. And companies like IRP have the technology to do that in real time. So there's absolutely no mystery of where your profitability is coming from. And then how do you control this situation then that you're in? And that's the next part of this talk, and it's maybe the bit that people might find slightly harder to follow because it's a little bit novel. And we think that you obviously control your costs and your profitability through traffic conversion, AOV. That's how you're going to get your numbers. That's what's going to drive your profitability. But to make profit, a big part of that is the control of traffic spend. And a doubling of your conversion rate is effectively a halving of your traffic spend. But if you have a low enough traffic spend, it doesn't matter so much what your conversion rate is. So it's the control of traffic spend that's a dangerous variable cost of revenue in e-commerce. And IRP controls these costs via the concept of a service marketplace. People are wondering, what is that? Well, you're already using one currently, because you've got an e-commerce site and then you're going, right, I need a PPC provider. Or what do you need? Is it Facebook? Is it PPC? Someone says it's TikTok. Well, why is the data not available? Every single one of those channels, that you know the rough cost within your market, what it's going to be, and who the good providers are at it, because they're all going to get you entirely different results. So you don't know any of that data. You've got a problem of data, and you think to yourself, I'll just pick one. Someone said someone's good, or they told me we're the best. And it is not the way to do it. And I think that is stacked highly in the favor of the channels and the providers, and moved away from the merchants, because the merchants need the data to pick the right choices. So that's why we say we formalize that with a platform and a service marketplace, because it's all built around merchant first to make profit, and there are two sides to that. And getting into how this happens then. So you're going to IRP measure all the results. We watch the results of all of the providers doing the channels. And we're going to pick Google as the example, because in most of the markets, 80% of markets, Google PPC is where you're going to drive most of your revenues. There are markets that are different, like beauty and a number of others, but for most people, it's Google PPC. Facebook runs, that we see across the board in our markets, on a last click attribution of 70%. And that's why I look at Meta shares and think, surely someone needs to talk a little bit more about their attribution. But we'll talk about Google PPC to show the example here. And what you do is you measure all these sales, and you measure all the costs in those channels by the providers on a last 30-day click, because there can only be one last click, and the other attributions are there to obfuscate things. So like any other standard, pick a standard and put everybody in measured in the same way, and that works just fine. And then the data sets that we collect within a service marketplace. So you have the channels, and sorry, the results on the right aren't quite accurate here, because maybe a few of the companies in the room, but you have all the channels that you're measuring your results for, and you've all the providers that you've measured their performance on. And the data then gets collected in and sits in a marketplace, all identically attributed, so that you know that it's correct. And then what do you get out of that? So what do you get out of that when you've collected that and accurately measured everybody's performance, which should have been done 20 years ago in e-commerce, in my mind? Well, you start to get the information on the sales of a company within a channel and the costs of the company within a channel. And then you can compare those with the other sales and the costs from the other companies. And you effectively get a league table And you get these league tables for every single channel that you're using. And you can get league tables for market growth. You can get data on average cost of sales, average growths, average margins, everything that you sensibly need without all the marketing hype that there's some kind of, something that's going to change it all. So you base it in data, like every sensible industry that exists, and you start to track them down. So let's pick Google PPC, because we've only got a certain amount of time. We can't talk about all the channels, but it's the same for the others. Number one, and this is actually, again, basically real-world data for one of the months. We had a company, now, you can caveat this with statistics, how many are they doing? They might have just one good client. Take all that in. You're still going to get to the end result. Who's good at it? Who's bad at it? Power PPC, massive growth, 74%, and a PPC CPA of 11.26. And it actually led them to a very low overall CPA for the company. And don't use ROAS, by the way, that's another example. So it's 5.97. You say, well, that's 18 point something ROAS. You got to invert it back, Hot clicks did pretty well too. 33% growth in that channel. PPC CPA of 16.39. Overall CPA of 7.82. You can run most businesses in those sorts of end cost of revenues or end CPAs. I'm doing £1 million and I'm giving 78,000 for marketing. That's fine. You make profit. Purple Pixel, not doing too bad. Something similar. Actually, it has a lower growth and a slightly lower CPA. So these things are normal, and you start to balance up which one's the right one for you. Then you're down to Fairy Dust PPC, and it's at minimal growth and it's a very high CPA. So they're really not doing very well, and the overall CPA is bankrupting the company. And right down the bottom, you've Pink Elephant PPC, who's actually lost money in the channel, and their CPA is massive, and the company will soon go out of business if they don't change. So how do you do this then in IRP? And all this is just intrinsic in the platform because it needs to be. They're not separate. A platform and your service market and your data and your analytics are not separate things. They're together because you need to start operating fast. You need to know in real time. You need to know what's good. You need to know what's bad. And how would you select a provider if you're asking IRP or if you're in the IRP service marketplace? Well, the merchants are going to look at historical data results for service providers. They're going to ask questions of them. What's your tactics? What's your strategy? Then they're going to compare their own results to what the service market's saying for a price, and that's going to give them then reference values, and then they're going to select their new providers based on performance. So without those steps, you're making decisions blind without the data, and that strikes everyone as totally obvious. Now go and look for that data out there on service providers. You'll not find it. Because Google and Facebook's CPAs are just absurd in e-commerce, to be honest, for most products. But their attribution model tells you that you add it all up, you get 200% of the sales, when you take your channels. And it's a joke in many ways, but they benefit from that. They benefit from obfuscation. There's no need for obfuscation. There's need for performance. There's a need for profit. So we've got real-world results here for a company in March. So grab this off the IRP world and its results in the service marketplace. And again, hopefully it's visible. I can't see this one done that way. So I've changed the names of the providers on the right. The company got 26 grand cost for 398 grand of sales. Target CPA of 7. They got a CPA of 6.7. You have to spend money, in the marketing channels. There's always some cost there. And then they have the providers, and the providers then go across the same thing, CPAs, growth in the channel. On the far left-hand side, the percentile is their percentile in their market for that month. If everyone else's PPC is growing, is theirs not growing? And so percentile is the opposite of, first. 73rd percentile means almost top quarter. So that channel's doing all right in-house. So that's a provider that's doing their email. They're doing their email in-house, quite common. That's very hard almost to be critical of that team. Say, actually, you're performing very badly. That usually makes you a lot of enemies. And people don't want to know how they're performing, quite frankly, a lot of the time. But we can see in the email marketing, very low spend, quite a small amount of their sales, and 23% growth. They're 56th percentiles. They're just in the top 50%. But the bottom one, channel, Bing PPC, done by Pink Elephant, cost sales CPA of 15.56, negative growth, and they're in the 23rd percentile. So this tells you something. This makes it quantitative. The entire industry needs to be quantitative. The entire industry needs to be based around profit. And it tells you that Bing is not delivering. So what's the answer to that then? How do you then, as a merchant, drive up your profit? Well, you swap the Pink Elephant probably for Parclick's PPC. And that will transform how you perform. Now, for most markets, all this works very, very, very well. There's the old market where margins are too tight or whatever it is. It's not an online market, but this is how 90% of the markets can be transformed. So going over this again, RP measures all the results. Why is everybody not doing it? That's just the odd part to me. We benchmark all service providers, channel markets. This puts the merchant in control because they select the best providers, and that has that underlying massive impact on sales and profits that we know how to calculate through the maths, and that's the function of a service market. So how do you build your e-commerce around profit? This is going back to what we were saying at the start. You need to know your sales, how it's calculated. It's useful to understand that there's the three levers. The next part, most people know their sales, by the way. You know, it's more accurate in your platforms than the Google Analytics. It's increasingly inaccurate in Google Analytics. You need to know your net profit with the step of e-commerce gross profit. That's an important step, very important. And then part two is you control costs and performance via service marketplace in our mind. And you're all doing that informally anyway. You also control things like conversion rates, and you could have service markets and that. But that's how you control whether or not you're going to make profit. And what does IRP? What does e-commerce look like? End up looking like on the IRP? And it's something I say to people as we go forward. Is this amateur nature of the marketplace at the minute, where it's like a shop, or it's like seen as when you've an admin system. It's all data. That is what the future is. So you're ending up with something that looks much more like a Bloomberg terminal than a Shopify or anything like that. And that's the way the world is going. But all that data has to be built around profit and the mechanisms we've been talking about here. So we call that the merchant first philosophy, really. And we believe that's how you build the industry, around merchant profit. And we believe it should be built around the merchant, because they're the one paying the bills. So I had a graphic there, a manifesto, that's actually off our website, maybe a bit too strong, but we believe in merchant first. We have some resources on our IRP website here for this, calculating net profit in real time, how you know your net profitability in real time. It's pretty much doable. You're going to get close to it anyway. Maybe not the exact pound, but well enough to know right now in a month, are you making money or not making money? Not whenever the accountant, a month later says, by the way, you just lost 10 grand last month. You need to know straight out. Profit and loss, the accounting format I talked about for e-commerce gross profit, it's on the website. I think that's important. All accountants, if there are any in the room, should follow that format. E-commerce market data, we anonymize and publish some of the market data that we have then out of the service marketplace. So that's available. And LinkedIn, you're more than welcome to follow us or like us. We publish monthly stats on the growth. And that's the end of the merchant first side of things. I have two more slides here. It's something that's been going on this week. And Kevin was at the launch of the report, and there'll be copies. There's copies on our website for anybody who wants to download it, and there's some flyers down there. But I think with Kevin as well, we'll probably put it on the Ecom Live site so you can get it. E-commerce is a very interesting market. Most people along here today are here because their businesses. They've got to make a living. They've got to make money, same as us. But the interesting thing about it is it actually has sort of a positive impact on the economy and the society, because it's a lot of export-based or regional-based sales that you're doing, and it ends up bringing inbound trade. So there's a report done by a local economist, and it detailed a 60-page report detailing the economics of e-commerce, and a lot of it is new, and some of the modeling is new, because e-commerce is sort of its numbers haven't been deconstructed to see what it does. It permeates a lot of areas of society, from services to logistics to service provision, and the numbers ended up being fairly staggering for an economy here that's about 48 billion or so in about 6 billion is related to e-commerce currently. Half that's through EDI, which we'd have to see, does that have the same impact as e-commerce through websites and B2B? But the numbers are huge, and they're growing numbers. The market's still growing. And we think that Northern Ireland, with a few trading advantages, really is a great place for e-commerce. And it's new information on that. So I thought I'd put in that just briefly at the end. But that's the merchant first philosophy. And I thank everyone for listening, and for Kevin for having me along. Denny.
Margin at which e-commerce economics don't add up. Like, do you see a ceiling margin for people to kind of gauge?
I do, and I think I probably need to. I think that's an area we need to get into in more detail to start to see about that. I mean, obviously, if your net profitability is getting down near 4 or 5%, it's debatable whether you should be running a business. I think, Vinny, you're talking 30 is a threshold where there's a business to be had above it. I think when you're getting down into the late 20s, say 27, something like that, it's harder for most markets. You've got to work harder in conversion. If you really get lean, you can find a market and make it work in the high 20s. Below 25, you're getting into trouble, and I would say low 20s is just virtually unviable for the marketing side. As a transactional side, if you can find a way to get no CPA or a very low CPA. But I think the early 20s, I don't know what you think yourself, it's barely viable.
It's possibly even a low threshold, I would think. I thought the number might be slightly bit higher. Just about the platform itself, because I suppose the service side of it's kind of new to me. Are you separating that out? Like, can I access that if I'm on a different, say, platform like Shopify?
We publish data on it, but the reality is with this stuff, it all needs to be combined in one, so that you're getting all that data pulled in and access to markets and reference values from a system. And so we don't have an API into it. It's really for the IRP ecosystem, and it's because it's a close coupling. You can we're going to have it in the end from the IRP Commerce Cloud or the trading terminal in there. You could swap a provider or connect with a provider. So it's a close coupling. The data we do put out there in market data on our own site publicly, but the mechanics of the service marketplace, no, it's IRP only.
And kind of final question for me, sorry.
Yeah.
We should just go and sit down somewhere else and talk. The way that it's set up and structured, and looking at the screenshot there and seeing it in live, it's set up for a trading manager, like a specific style of e-commerce person. Who do you think utilizes it best? Have you seen certain skills? Because you see job specs for e-commerce managers now, and they're absurd. Like, they're crazy. They want you to be everything, including working in the warehouse. What's the sort of skills you think that people need to leverage the platform and the data, I suppose?
Yeah. Vinny, I think that's a great question, and I think it's something that's recurring. It's actually something that came up for me yesterday, again, back to, e-commerce manager, talking about various things where, what is an e-commerce manager? Is it an IT person? Is it a demand side marketer? Is it, exactly what is it? Or is it a technical person? And this is the challenge with it. The e-commerce person, for me, should be accountable for profit and loss in the site. And then I think, as you say, trading, they're a trading manager. And I think the best ones we have seen are just relentless traders. That they're maybe interfacing with marketing department saying, right, what's selling now? And they're controlling P&L, controlling traffic channels, and controlling decisions. But that frightens a lot of people, because which e-commerce manager wants to be responsible for P&L? And I think it's something that should be defined. What is an e-commerce manager? Because you read 10 specs, you'd think it's 10 entirely different careers.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Cheers. Any other questions?
Just would be interested in your thoughts around profitability for omni-channel merchants. So say, for example, where you're driving digital activity, and you might have a customer that's researching online and then purchasing offline.
Yeah.
So it's not clear cut. So you can
Sure.
you can really see it from a profitability point of view if you're a
Yeah.
pure play e-commerce player. But a lot of us
Yeah.
are spending money to drive traffic in store as well.
100%. That's a very important question. And I think the difference between retail is you have overheads, but you don't have that massively variable cost of sale. I recommend that accountants decide what contribution of sales came from their website. I would just allocate to go, right, part of that budget, or separate the budget out. So if you had 8% marketing budget, 8% CPA spent on the website, you had 2 which you allocated to branding. Don't add it into the website, take it out, allocate it to your retail stores, and just do the accounting with that and take a number. That's important. I think that, traditional retail, quite frankly, when you think about it, it's a lot more efficient. You don't have all these service providers, technologies, people walk into your shop, they walk in. So I would just allocate budget and you'll find it's more profitable. There's one more question over here. And it's really important to do that. The accounts is everything in this. That e-commerce gross profit step's absolutely critical. If companies aren't doing that, it's the one thing I'd say from this talk, do that.
Hi there. With regards to obviously the data and how it's aggregated, if you were, for argument's sake, either a historic brand and you've not necessarily transitioned yet to leveraging like paid performance to drive e-com sales, like doing more D2C play, is there a way to look at the data from a benchmarking perspective to get an idea of, let's say, or we're a VC company and we're going to enter this market, can you get an idea then of expected CPAs within like sub-sectors and sub-niches to know what you might have to project for?
100%. We publish all that in the market data side, and you'd select your market and you'd see then what the CPAs are for your channels. And I would say that generally, if you have a very high margin, your CPA tends to be higher. That's the general guide. And lower margin companies, products, it's lower. I think, as in e-commerce, people say generally, and these things aren't defined, they should be defined. Exactly what is the conversion rate? Is it based off sessions or is it based off visitors? And we could say that conversion rate 2% in e-commerce. I would say that as a cost of acquisition number, 8%. But I think that's because it's a bit inefficient. I think really most markets, you want to be in the 6s, high margin ones. Now that's if you're running very tight operations, which you have to. But once you stray above 8%, it starts to get damaging to the bottom line. Because you've got to remember that if you're on 8%, every percentage point that you're paying above that as a cost of revenue is knocked off straight off the net profit margin. So if you were, net profit margin of 10 and your CPA spikes from 8 to 13, well, you're now a net profit margin of 5. But no, we publish all the benchmarks. I think it's really important. I think it should all be based in data and then all integrated real time into, trading terminal sort of format.
Good.
Yeah, good questions. Appreciate that. I was able to answer.
Thanks, Daniel. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Hidden in plain sight, like everyone should be talking to you about this after the discussion.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it's not just me. The things that I want policymakers to take a look. I mean, I don't want to be the front person for it because I think it's, but I wanted to get people's awareness. It's just something we'd seen, but the volume we had done for Northern Ireland, we thought, look, there's something here. It needs to be examined. Yeah. I suppose, Vinny, the interesting thing was, like, nobody has examined the economics of e-commerce, and it's very beneficial. And like Ireland can, do the same thing. You have dual access to markets by bringing your stuff over the border, and so you have the kind of same advantages by using Northern Ireland. So really, what it was we wanted somebody to take interest in it, and I think, look, the economists that saw it and the policymakers were really amazed at what the dynamics were of the market. So. We're doing something virtuous by being involved in e-commerce, all the companies.
Yeah, but it's a consistent theme. It was something that you talked about last year as well. I know Kevin's very passionate about it too. So that consistency will carry through, you'd imagine.
Yeah, it took 2 years to do the report. That was part of the problem, you know.
I'm sure like it's going to be distributed anyway, but it would be great to get a
Yeah.
copy of it and maybe do some follow-up.
We'll give you one. It's on our website. You go to rpcommerce.com. Everybody can grab it. You don't have to give your email or whatever. We just want to alert people to it.
Brilliant. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Good questions, Vinny.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, well, good to meet you in person.
Likewise.
Yeah.